the arupa realm, and it seems slightly odd to use the word realm in conjunction with the word formless. So this is a very, very high and refined condition of consciousness. And I believe the Buddha, the Bodhisattva had practiced in some way, perhaps, these formless types of meditations.
Yes, yeah. Mastery into those meditations is very advanced. And it's really the peculiar genius of the Bodhisattva that he was able to attain to those states, and his teacher at the time praised him and said, now you've attained to the ultimate. And he was able to know, well, no, this is still within conditioned existence. Mm-hmm. Well, I think almost anybody else would just assume this has to be the ultimate.
Right, because they're so subtle. And they're completely abstract rather than concrete. There's no substantial imagery there. There's just these very hard to grasp ideas. Now, let's talk about perhaps what they mean. So just list off the 4 arupa meditations.
There's the realm of boundless space, the realm of boundless consciousness, the realm of nothingness, and the realm of neither perception nor non-perception.
Mm-hmm. So when you try to visualize or imagine boundless space, are there any hints or suggestions about how one would go about that?
There is a methodology for developing these meditations that the Buddha laid out with a couple of variations. Mm-hmm. But the basic idea is you find it by abstracting away the physical plane. Mm-hmm. And one way of doing it is to develop kasina meditation, mm-hmm. which is meditation on a visual disc. And then you expand the disc to a very large space in your mind and then abstract it out and just pay attention to the space that's left.
Uh-huh. Space itself, it's very difficult, demanding exercise in abstract. I'm glad you used the word abstract thinking. Mm. And this is what not everybody, even in the modern day, we're quite familiar with abstract thinking. When we teach children arithmetic, we say 2 apples, and 2 apples is 4 apples, or equals 4 apples. But what we can't just say to them, 2 and 2 is 4, because they're concrete. They need things.
Yes.
But eventually the apples drop away and we're left with 2 and 2 is 4. It seems to us to be perfectly sensible. But we're really not talking about anything. Mm-hmm. We're talking about an abstract principle. So this is what they're doing in a sense with space. And I often think this might be a new period in history, the idea of abstract thought that doesn't require forms. Mm-hmm. It's kind of Platonic.
Yes.
It sounds like it's the idealism of Plato.
And the idea of space itself is actually not trivial or obvious. There were debates in early Buddhism about what exactly was meant by space. Mm-hmm. The Sarvastivada school, for example, considered space to be unconditioned, mm-hmm. like Nibbana.
Yes.
The Theravada always held that only Nibbana is unconditioned. Mm-hmm. And they developed a definition of 3 kinds of space. Mm-hmm. The first kind is the space that's created, like when you dig a hole, mm-hmm. then there's a space created. Or when you build a house, you create a space in the rooms. The second kind of space is the kind that's developed in meditation by removing the kasina. Mm-hmm. And the third kind is space as an abstract idea that you can have discrete objects separated by some distance of kilometers or yojanas or whatever. Mm-hmm. And this is the idea of space that's meant in boundless space. And of those 3, only the first one, creative space, is considered to be conditioned. And that's obvious. We condition space by digging out the hole. The other two are considered not real.
Oh.
They're only conventional concepts.
That's very, very interesting. I mean, that kind of logical processing really didn't occur in the West until Wittgenstein. The idea that words do not necessarily point to something real. It's amazing. So this is dwelling on this meditation on space that one would, after death, proceed to be reborn. I mean, for lack of a better word, reborn in this non-spatial dimension.
Yes. And this is in itself a very useful contemplation, to imagine these beings that exist for long periods of time entirely without bodies. This is a very useful contemplation for discerning the difference between mind and body. Because in any other point in samsara, whether we're humans or animals or devas, our consciousness, our mind is normally associated with a body. And it becomes a difficult exercise sometimes to discern what is mind and what is body. That's actually one of the insights. But there are two cases where mind can exist without body. One is the brief period between death and rebirth. And the second is mind arising in this realm without any physical substrate. And this is a very subtle and difficult concept. And even in ancient times, there were tendencies in later Buddhism to try and make some kind of a qualification of that, well, there still has to be some kind of body, a subtle body of some sort. But that wasn't the intention in the original teaching, the original texts. It's quite clear. This is for khandha existence. There's no physical form. There's only mind, perception, feelings, and mental formations.
And this would be how it would be experienced in meditation. It would be an entirely bodiless experience.
Yes.
So let's go on to consciousness again. Boundless consciousness.
Yes.
That's even harder to grasp.
Yes.
Space.
Space, the first one, boundless space, still has this very tenuous connection to the physical realm, in that space is a concept related to physicality. But when you abstract away space, and what's left is consciousness. Consciousness pervading infinite space. You remove space, there's just infinite consciousness without reference to space. So we're not talking about like spatially extended. It's boundless. There's no boundary of any kind, and it cannot be located in space.
Yes.
Location is a quality of physical level of rupa khandha.
Very interesting. Developing that. Now, let's talk about lifespans in these these planes of so-called existence. Does it increase in duration
It
as
does.
it goes up?
It does. They're measured in thousands of kappas.
Thousands of
kappas.
Eons.
Yes. And each successive realm is longer lifespan than the preceding realm. So these is very immense stretches of time.
Yes. Unimaginable kind of concepts.
Yes. The whole world's systems are coming and going thousands and thousands of times.
Yes.
The being persists in a state without any body.
In modern times, we just talk about 10 to the power of 30 or something like that, or how many zeros you want to add after it. We can't process those numbers either. There's astronomical numbers, but that's our modern equivalent, certainly.
Yes.
Is there anything more to say about consciousness, this infinite consciousness plane?
There's really not much more we can say about it, but as subtle as it is, it's still transcended by the next level, which is the level of nothingness, which is akinchayatna, which is really like no thingness.
No thingness.
So even the concept of consciousness falls away. This is a much more attenuated and void kind of state. It's a great emptiness. There's no thing. There's nothing you can point to there.
Right.
And then that itself, even nothingness, becomes too busy. It's too much.
Minimalism taken to the extreme.
Yes. So the next stage is defined as neither perception nor non-perception. Nevasanya Nahasanya. And the name is given as almost like an act of desperation. What are we going to call this? It's so subtle. It's hard to define. It's not perception because there's no real sense of subject or object, but it's neither non-perception because it's not an empty blankness. It's not an annihilation.
There's some perception that you are in this.
There's a very subtle perception. Now, there are a couple of kind of charming metaphors that are given to bring out this idea of neither perception or non-perception. They both concern a bhikkhu and a novice going on alms round. In the first metaphor, the novice spies that the bhikkhu is about to step into a puddle of water, and he warns him and says, "Venerable sir, be careful, there is water." And the bhikkhu says, "Oh, good, there's water. Will you fill up my water flask?" And he says, "Venerable sir, there is no water." Yeah? And the second one is similar. Somebody wants to offer some ghee, and the monk is going to take it in his bowl, and the novice says, "We can't use your bowl, venerable sir. There's oil." He's oiled the bowl to protect it, and the monk says, "Oh, good, there's oil. Fill up my oil flask." And he says, "Venerable sir, there is no oil."
Yeah, so it's their way of describing the least possible amount of.
Yes.
Even we have awkward ways of trying to describe that it's not there substantially, but there is traces.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one way of thinking of this state is it's samsara at the bare minimum. It's the very least amount of conditionality or samsaric existence. It's the most subtle form, but it's still within the conditioned realm.
Is there some feeling remaining?
Yes, it's said that there are the other aggregates, but the feeling is always equanimous. There's no joy or unhappiness. It's just a peaceful, equanimous feeling.
Everything after the fourth jhana on is characterized by equanimous feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I'm curious about that I haven't found a statement of it is the faculty of mental formations. Would a being who is mind only for aeons of time, do they think, and what do they think about?
Sankharas, you mean?
Yes.
Sankhara is absent. And, it seems to me that certainly the ideation has to be absent because it ceases by the second jhana, right? The discursive activity. But it's kind of it's a kind of resultant of volition, like the getting in at that point. It's a matter of just the exhaustion of the karma, I think, and then it pops out.
Yes, yeah.
It's hard to imagine that it's experienced at all in any way, but there is some sort of equanimous feeling remaining. Anyway, these are abstract, very difficult to manage. We call them realms. Now, that by the last realm, either perception or non-perception, it's got to be fantastic durations.
Yes.
Is it a desirable realm to go into from a Buddhist point of view, or is it problematic because of the incredible duration?
Well, incredible duration doesn't really matter in the total run of samsara. It's considered to be a fortunate rebirth because there's no suffering.
Yes.
And so you stay there for 8,000 cups of time, and then you have to do stuff. You report somewhere else, and you have to carry on.
And if you pop out when there is no Buddha around, perhaps you miss the opportunity for enlightenment. If I recall, was it the Brahmin who determined that the baby Bodhisattva was going to become the Buddha? He did not live long enough to see the Buddha, and he entered into the Arupa.
He entered into one of the Arupa
so he missed that. He was very, very disappointed. So it can be a missed opportunity to be around in the time when a Buddha arises and the Dhamma is made clear. This is some sort of critique also of the discovery of these Arupa dimensions of consciousness preceding the time of the Buddha.
Yes.
It's all a little bit confused as well. The story seems to be that the Buddha attained these things, and then having found them lacking, he goes off to explore his own path process and remembers as a child entering the first jhana.
Yeah.
And you would have thought that in order to develop the Arupa jhanas, you must know about the form, the Rupa jhanas.
Yes.
Something as simple as that. But it seems that he's coming. He doesn't reference his training. He references his childhood, entering jhana as a child. It's very. It's some explaining to do there.
That is a point that's occurred to me too. That this is a kind of a difficult crux in the text.
Yeah.
My speculation is that the state of Arupa jhana is more conducive to actually preparing the mind for realizing the unconditioned. That the Arupa realms are too subtle. In one sense, they're too close to the unconditioned. That there's nothing to work with there. Whereas developing the jhana, the mind still has the capacity of taking an object.
It also seems that by that one could bypass the development of the Rupa jhanas and go straight to the Arupa jhanas.
I think that's
somehow.
also possible too. I don't think it's necessary to follow things in the precise order.
But these remain more or less speculative issues, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
So we won't attempt to firmly decide one way or the other in this brief talk.
Yes.
But to allow people something to reflect with and to work with about these, because there's a lot of strong opinions about the value of these things. There's some rejection to ignore that, go straight on to insight and etc. Or what is the benefit of this? Or here's the other question. Is it the case that arahants all have necessarily attained the arupa?
No, that's definitely can be stated no, that it's not required. There is a principle stated in Abhidhamma that jhana is necessary for realization of path and fruit, so that the rupa jhanas, the rupa level of consciousness, is required. The Buddha also mentions in brief, without ever developing it much, the idea of bare insight. Although usually when he spoke about a path, it was through the four jhanas and then realization. But in later times, particularly in Burma, there have been the development of schools of bare insight meditation. But when you examine the theory behind them, they still admit that there has to be jhana, but they say it's a momentary jhana.
Yes. That the path moment occurs with the intensity of jhana.
Yes.
It's, of course, a very interesting area, which is somewhat outside of our cosmology videos, but we'll perhaps do some more on Abhidhamma sometime.
But the benefit of arupa states is to open the mind both to emptiness and to the discernment of body and mind. And I think, as I said, mastery of those states is very advanced, but I think you can get a glimpse of those states by working with this idea of abstracting away. There's another sutta that the Chula Sunyata Sutta, the Lesser Discourse on Emptiness, where the Buddha lays out a path of development for these arupa states that any reasonably competent meditator can get at least a glimpse of an idea, is by starting with ordinary reality, which is perception of village, and then in the mind abstract away any man-made objects so that all that's left is nature, and that's perception of forest. Then you abstract away all living things, so there's only earth. Then you abstract away the earth, and there's only space. And then you dissolve the boundaries of that, and it becomes boundless space. And then from there, you're in a state of mind where consciousness is filling boundless space. So if you cease to pay attention to space, you're left with boundless consciousness. Then you cease to pay attention to consciousness, and all that's left is no thingness. And then you can attempt to make the last tricky step and not pay attention to the concept of nothingness.
Yeah, that's very good. Nice explanation. As good as we can do. As always, it's very clarifying. Confronting these things, usually when you read about them, it's left with a bewildered mystery. But
yes,
these are all very helpful descriptions of both how to approach this, but also this mysterious and difficult to grasp idea of existence in these dimensions of bodiless mind. Yes.